Right. Um, as we get started tonight with this very important conversation here, how this meeting is going to go down, as is our usual format with Justice and Beyond. If you would go ahead and take a moment to turn off your cameras if you'd like, and to mute your phones, that would be very helpful to keep down on any distracting noise that may be in the background. And so we're going to begin with a word of prayer in just a moment, and then we'll have some opening remarks just so that we can set the tone and give you some information about who Justice and Beyond is and some of our work. And then we will get started with our conversation for tonight that is centered around hurricane season and the understanding of how we need to prepare ourselves in a much deeper fashion, trying to get some answers to some questions so that we're kept safe. And so I'll have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll go about getting some answers and hearing from some very important people doing some very significant work. And then we'll call for some action. We don't like to leave this conversation without making some asks. And so there will be some asks that will be made, and some will come that have come from the Justice and Beyond pillars. Others will come from those who are participating tonight. And then we'll close with announcements and with prayer. And we make it our goal to be done tonight by 6:30. And so with that said, let's begin with a word of prayer, and then we'll get started with our meeting for tonight. I'll take a moment now to ground yourself, to realize that we're all in this together, that we cannot tackle the issues that we're facing in this moment in our city and even beyond without coming together on one accord to reason with each other and to actively participate one with another on being a part of the solution, a part of the change. So let's make that prayer. Oh God, we give you thanks that you have created us as a community. You created us not as islands and not as those who stand alone. God, that we're not monolithic, but that we are in unison. God, we pray that you would give greater unity to this city, that there would cease to be division between those who have and those who have not. God, that's a long time in coming, and we've gotten into this place where we are through a long history, oh God. But give us a route out, God. And so, God, we ask that you would give us the clear answers that obviously we don't have right now. So, God, to this end and in this conversation tonight, we ask that we would be able to figure out a clear path and an understanding that would greater protect all of those in our city and not simply some during hurricane season. So, God, we now ask that you would give us wisdom and understanding and creative hearts and minds, and that our passion tonight would be displayed in a way that blesses each other. We ask this in the name of Almighty God, and I ask it in the name of my Savior, Jesus. Amen. As we begin tonight again, amen. My name is Pastor Gregory T. Manning. I'm the pastor of Broadmoor Community Church, where no perfect people are allowed. I'm one of the co-moderators for Justice and Beyond, along with the brilliant, beautiful Sylvia McKenzie and the very intelligent Trevor David Bryan II. And we are glad to present this forum along with the other pillars of Justice and Beyond. Justice and Beyond is not run by one or two people, but we are led by the pillars of that have come together to state that they want to be a part of the leadership of Justice and Beyond, the vision casting and the planning that all needs to go on into having a good forum and giving good information and then acting upon that information. And so those are pillar groups. If your organization wants to be a pillar, and believe me, we need you. We need for this to be a collaborative. We need for this to be a collective. We need for everyone's voice to be heard. So if you want to be a part of this and be a pillar for whatever organization that you represent, we'll be glad to have you. And even on instances where you want to come in as an individual to be a part of the governance of this body, then we'd be happy to have you. Know that Justice and Beyond is focused in this season on several namely 4 distinct areas. And one is education, the other is housing, the other is environment, and the final one is criminal justice. We want to move the needle and create systemic change in those 4 areas. We are also working quite diligently on reparations. We believe, as Justice Amian, that it is long overdue for reparations to be given in some form or fashion, to be decided by a reparations task force that we're hoping to get established within the city of New Orleans. With that said, we're going to move into our discussion on tonight, and I'm going to ask that our presenters tonight would announce themselves and would simply give a 1.5 minute introduction of yourself and your work. If you would do so, please, and then we'll move into our questions for tonight. And so with that said, let's see, is Miss Denise Hunter here?
Yes, I am.
All right, Miss Denise, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Would you take about a minute just to introduce yourself and tell us about your work?
Okay, my name is actually LaWanda Denise Hunter. I'm the owner and operator of Lower Ninth Ward Design Lab, where I make original and custom leather bags. I'm also a member of A Community Voice, where we discuss issues that are affecting us in our communities and try to get awareness to it, to whatever those issues are. We speak with politicians, candidates who are running for office, or those who are our representatives. We speak with them on Thursday nights. We have a call at 6:30, and we invite them to come on to discuss what it is that they do in their job and what they do to represent the community, as well as ask them to look into some of the issues that we might have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Denise. What do you want to be referred to in this setting tonight?
Denise is fine. Denise is what I go by.
All right, thank you, Ms. Denise. Appreciate you being here tonight, and we look forward to hearing more from you. Mr. Alston, are you here?
I am. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for being here tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation.
Would you just tell us, for those who are participating, what your job is, your role right now, and anything else you want us to know? Take about 1.5 to 2 minutes, if you would.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Austin Feldbaum. I'm the Hazard Mitigation Program Administrator for the City of New Orleans. We're part of the Office of Emergency Preparedness, and so my work deals very closely with emergency preparedness and response for all types of emergencies, but especially natural hazards like hurricanes and floods. So the Hazard Mitigation Office is primarily focused on reducing risk before disasters happen, and also facilitating and coordinating the recovery process from disasters. So we develop and work on 2 major sort of planning documents that guide our work. And those are the Hazard Mitigation Plan, which we updated in 2020. And we're in the process of working on some of the actions and projects that are in that plan now. And then also the what we're calling the Comprehensive Recovery Plan, which is being developed now, and it's the city's first ever pre-disaster framework for how we approach disaster recovery.
All right, we look forward to hearing more about that, Austin. Thank you again so much. And Avery Williams, are you with us?
Yes, good day, sir. My name is
All right.
Avery Williams. I work also with A Community Voice. What we're trying to do is push for change within the community, sort of bring forward issues that we're all affected by. And for the most part, what we really want to do is inform the community as a whole, so that we can face these challenges. As Ms. Hunter stated earlier, We have a call every Thursday with a community voice, in which we work alongside other community groups to have a collective input on the challenges that we all face. Me myself personally, I work as a government contractor. So my job allows me to be able to have a better understanding of how the decisions that we all make can change and affect the community as a whole.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Avery. Appreciate your work and appreciate you definitely being here tonight. So this conversation tonight, for all of that are present, our panelists as well as our participants, we want to make clear and get some clear understanding of how we can ensure that people are kept safe during the next hurricane, that not if it comes, but when it comes, and to make sure that we don't encounter the same problems that we did on the Hurricane Ida, that historic outage that we had, where most people died because of being overwhelmed by heat or improper use of generators. And we're also housing and food insecure. So are we any closer to be better off than we were last year with Hurricane Ida? And we hope the answer is yes, but if not, how do we get there? How do we make sure that we are? So we are mainly concerned tonight with, not that everybody's not a concern, but we're concerned with three different groups of folks. Number one is the group of people that absolutely cannot get out. They don't have paperwork to get out. They don't have the means to get out. In a bit of a catastrophic hurricane, they need to get out, but they simply cannot. Folks who are under the radar, who are people that maybe are housing insecure or houseless. And then the second group are people who need to get out, but just don't have the means to get out. We know that being able to evacuate in the midst of a storm is also a point of privilege too. Some people just do not have the funding or even the means to get out. They don't have those funds to put up that could pay for a hotel when FEMA says I'll reimburse you. They don't know where shelters are, and they don't have relatives to go to. And so they need to get out, but they can't. And then thirdly, the group that we're concerned about is those who are first responders. We understand by some pillars that are involved in Justice and Beyond that there was some issue with our RTA, specifically our RTA bus drivers during Hurricane Ida, being provided both shelter and provided pay that was going to afford them the ability to be able to stay in the midst of a storm. So not only were they staying, were city officials being housed when there is an evacuation. So we're concerned namely about those three groups. We're asking for those who respond, those panelists that are here tonight will respond, keeping those three groups in mind. And so with that said, I'm going to just ask the first question, and this is one that we are very concerned about. Is this is the location of community shelters and cooling stations. As it was stated before, we have seen that during last year's hurricane, well, one of last year's hurricanes, namely Hurricane Ida, we saw that people remained in the city. I, for one, was located in College Station, Texas, but I had people calling me from the community as well as from our church saying, Pastor, I don't know where a cooling center is. How do I get there? I've been waiting for hours for a bus to get there. I don't know where the bus stop is. One of the things that Together New Orleans, which I sit on the executive team for, a leadership council, wants to do is have 85 stand-up shelters that are operated by solar powered generators and also have battery storage to be able to operate immediately in the midst of a hurricane and a catastrophic outage such last year. Right now, we do not have that capacity yet. Those 85 shelters are 85 lighthouses, we call them, are not up. So where are we in terms of that? So I'm going to give this first answer. Ask Mr. Austin if you would just give us some background as to what you know.
Yeah,
I
sure.
just tell you that
um,
I just wanted to interrupt quickly to say that Oliver Thomas is here.
All right,
Okay, sorry.
great. Council Member Thomas, how are you, sir?
Doing good, thank you, Pastor.
Good, good. And so we just had introductions. Number one, I want you to tell me, because I think we talked about this, how much time you have with us.
Well, I've been struggling to get on. I had until 5:30 for my next meeting, but as long as I leave in time for my next meeting for 6, I can stay until then. And we just had a meeting with Homeland Security and all of the different agencies to outline their plan for hurricane season. Hurricane season just started. Well, it started, so municipalities now are instituting where and what their plans will be, from control to access to cooling stations to generators to essential services. So Homeland Security and Colin Arnold has that information that you guys can access, and I can share some of that while I'm here.
All right, so we're hoping to have you two until about 6 o'clock. So we'll get you out there here about maybe 5 till 6 or something.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, so and we were asking, and thank you for that introduction there about that information. Do you want to? I give everybody the opportunity to give a brief introduction about who they are. I think we know a lot about you, but if there's anything else you want to say for about a minute, we'd love to hear it.
No, just Oliver Thomas, councilman for District E, and just about everything else. If anybody's had a public life, it's been me. So looking forward to this discussion, as well as the rest of the work that we're doing in a lot of other sectors and a lot of other venues.
All right. Thank you, Councilman. We appreciate you being here. We're going to go back to Mr. Austin in terms of the cooling stations and what information you can give us about those.
Sure. Yeah, I can answer that. So I think when we spoke last in February or March, I talked about some of the work that we've been doing since Hurricane Ida around kind of reinforcing our ability to stand up cooling shelters if we need to again, right? So we had last year when Hurricane Ida happened, we had actually only recently completed the electrical work at the 8 Nord rec centers that allowed us to easily bring in the generators after Ida and plug them up. So since then, we've been working on a couple of different fronts to kind of shore up our ability to do that again. The first is sort of on the operational and logistics plan. So we've developed some written plans for what we're calling emergency resource centers. And that kind of helps us with the human resources and the logistics and sort of the playbook if we need to stand that up, the day after a storm again. So that's one thing that we've moved forward. The other, which we haven't, I don't think, really talked about publicly yet, is some work that we're doing together with Entergy. So what we're doing with Entergy is a combination of electrical work and gas line work at the 8 cooling centers, the 8 Nord sites that we activated after Ida, and then a couple of additional sites. It's a couple of libraries, as well as the Holly Grove Carrollton Multipurpose Center, and one other location, which I'm just blanking on. In total, it gives us about 12 locations across the city that are going to be generator ready. So they have manual transfer switches, and then a quick connect to the gas line so that we can bring in natural gas generators and plug them into the main line. That's good because after Ida, we had teams of people working around the clock to deliver diesel fuel to generators to try to keep them fueled up and running. So this eliminates the need for us to spend our time for our first responders during those first days after a storm running fueling trips because they're running on natural gas. It's also quieter and cleaner. So that's our near-term goal, was to make sure that we entered this hurricane season better than we entered last hurricane season. So that's our progress there. That work is underway. It should be done by July. And the holdup there is just procuring the electrical pieces.
And so you're saying by July, we should have 12 operational cooling centers?
Well, 12 generator ready centers, right? So the generators are not permanently installed there, but they are on call. They're available to us if we need them. So within something like 24 hours from making the decision to do so, we could have those buildings powered up and ready to go.
And so let me just ask you this, as of June the 1st, and we are assuming very hopefully and optimistically that Entergy is in a much better position than it was last year, that if we had a catastrophic outage, again, if Entergy is not prepared and we have the same sort of catastrophe, June 1st and the lights go out, how many let's say June 5th, the hurricane season starts June 1st. June 5th, we have a catastrophic hurricane. How many cooling centers do we have at that moment?
I mean, certainly the 8 that we had last year, it would just be that we would have to bring in we'd have to bring in the diesel generator, not the natural gas generator. So we've got, the ability to connect really any building. The difference that we're talking about before and after the work that we're doing is just whether or not it has a quick connect setup, and it's a little quicker and easier to make that setup. But so yeah, we've got at least the same 8 sites that we used last year.
And so with that 8, and I'll move to somebody else in just a moment because I want to see what others have to add to this. But with that 8, those Nord centers, and I'm not sure, maybe others know where exactly those 8 Nord centers are located. And number one, is there a map that indicates, I mean, certainly we can look it up, but is there a ready to go map for somebody, for myself, if I needed to begin dispersing that information at church, where those 8 are? And secondly, are they equally dispersed all throughout every district? So yeah.
I don't think that we've published a map yet, but should the occasion arise when we need to use those, of course, we'll be pushing maps out and lists of where they're located. So one of the first things that we did after Hurricane Ida, because we were sorely aware that we did not have a cooling center in every neighborhood last year, and that the cooling centers were in some cases very far from where people were. So we wanted to, it was a priority for us to make progress in that regard. So one of the things that we did was a mapping exercise where we, drew a mile radius around the cooling centers, and then we sort of located where the gaps were. So that was a big part of how we decided what facilities we were going to add this year through the work that we're doing with Entergy. So I think that we've closed those gaps. We're still limited. Parts of the city, like out in Little Woods, parts of Algiers, things are far apart, especially publicly owned facilities. So, we're a little bit limited by where we have publicly owned buildings that we can use.
All right, and we have some other questions around that, but here's my question is ultimately what we wanted to establish is that if there is no map and we would generate a map after the catastrophe comes, would it not be better to already make people aware of where those sites are so that we're not scrambling at the last minute, as it were, to get that information to them? First of all, it will make people feel more secure so that they already know where those places are, as we're asking people to come up with a hurricane plan, if they already have that information in hand to know what they are, instead of distributing that information once we're in it.
That's a fair point, Reverend Manning. I mean, I think that, let me take that back to the team and see what they think. Part of it is that hopefully, and in most cases where we do have power outages, it's not the whole city, right? Even after Hurricane Zeta, not the entire city was out, or after the tornado in the east, right? So we might need one facility, but hopefully it's very rare that we need all of them operating at once, right? So I think my communications people might have a specific way that they want to do that, but I'll take that back to the team.
Please, and I want to ask Avery to weigh in on this. If there's anything that you want to say to this effect.
Yeah, my apologies. Yeah, I wanted to ask concerning the shelters, how many people are expected to be able to be housed in them, being that um, during a storm, we have the power outages, we're expected to have the generators, um, or because trying to get a better understanding of what could take place. Will this information be provided after the storm or before the storm so that people will know exactly, as it being brought up, the location? Because I would think that we wouldn't want too many people heading in one direction.
Uh, Well, in the international principles of recovery, it's very difficult to determine if you've talked to the United Nations Disaster Prevention Bureau or many experts around the world. It's very difficult to determine a number based on the disaster and based on which facilities. So what you want is an optimal amount of facilities that are open throughout the area of impact and throughout the region. To say how many people will be able to be housed, if the convention center is wiped out, if New Orleans East Hospital is wiped out, if Joe Brown Center is wiped out, then the numbers that would go there would be gone. So to name a facility, I'm just talking about international principles of how you deal with disaster. What you want to do is have the maximum amount of shelters in place regionally based on a couple things. What you expect in terms of the category of the disaster, and then you begin to adjust with the direction of the disaster. So it would be very difficult to put a number on it. Now, I'm not saying maybe they can't quantify it in some way, but to say we're going to have 100,000 shelter for 100,000 people, or for 50, 60, or 70,000 people, there are too many categories and factors that have to go into that, let alone what's the direction of the destruction or the path of the storm. Now, in terms of bare minimum, you want to do a few things. You want to have the federal government, along with the state and local community, name shelters that are identified as shelters. Secondly, you want to know which one of those have access to a generation of power generation. And then thirdly, what level of distribution in terms of how long the recovery would be, or how long they'll be sheltered in that place be. So I think those are some of the things that, you can kind of put in place before a disaster happens. It's kind of difficult to say, well, we're going to have shelter for 100,000 people. We're going to have shelter for 50,000 people. If the storm wipes out the larger shelters, we could wipe out all of them.
Right. And thank you, Councilmember. Thank you, Avery. But let me say this, just to make clear, Austin, when we talk about the emergency resource centers, these are day centers and not shelters per se, where people would rest for the night. Which are they?
That's my understanding. Yeah, we generally, as a storm approaches, are prepared for a very limited number of overnight sheltering, and generally that's scaled to what we estimate our unhoused community is. And that's usually the Rosenwald Center is the first one that gets set up like that. We were prepared to do that during Hurricane Ida. But yeah, generally these are day centers. And I understand, of course, the dilemma that puts us in when it's hot at night and those nighttime temperatures are the real threat. And that's a problem that we need to continue to solve. But these are not intended to be residential shelters.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into that more. But I think, in fact, I know, people were sent to the hospital, and I think some even died because of being overcome by the heat in Hurricane Ida. And so we really want to go through another hurricane season with even temperatures expected to be more severe, more intense than they were last year, not having a place where people can shelter at night. Miss Denise, you want to weigh in on this? Any thoughts?
I do. I do have some thoughts. Because I remember during this past storm with Ida, you know, he was speaking about generators, about gas generators and all of this and that. I remember the lines were ridiculous. And I remember that a lot of gas stations weren't open because they couldn't be online because they didn't have electricity. So we were waiting in lines in vain. So you're talking about gas and then you're saying about, okay, get a generator and then, you know, put gas in it. So, okay, gas prices are about to be $6 a gallon. So who's gonna be able to afford that? Number one. Number two, why aren't you guys thinking about using solar or wind power? You have or hydropower. You have the river right there. When the winds are blowing before these storms happen, can't you harness some of that kind of energy instead of always looking to gas and talking about natural gas and all these gases? You never talk about carbon monoxide poisoning. You told you know the mayor was on TV saying to put the thing 20 feet away from your house and away from your neighbor's house. As close as we live in New Orleans, that's almost impossible in some neighborhoods. So why aren't we using more solar power? And you have people who have solar panels on their houses. Why aren't we helping them to get batteries so that they can harness some of this energy and maybe be able to stay in their homes? But if you know, you're just talking about a daytime situation when you're gonna have to go home. Elderly people are going home to hot homes, and that's a stroke, a heat stroke waiting to happen. So, I mean, I don't know how you guys make decisions without like thinking everything through, because that's some of what you just said is kind of like really weak to say that we've been through Katrina and we've had, you know, that Katrina was supposed to be the drill. We're supposed to be experts at this by now. And we look at what happened with Ida, and it shows that we're moving backward. We're not moving forward. It's, you know, you got to have some better answers than that. You really do.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Denise. I'm going to give Austin, before you respond to that, because I know we don't have Councilmember Thomas as long as we do you, but Councilmember, what do you say about District E and in terms of, and really just looking at the whole city? Yes, these gas powered generators are an issue.
Yeah, Mr. Denise's question was an important one. I asked that question during the meeting. We just had a presentation a couple of weeks ago from Homeland Security to the Health Department on our hurricane preparation already. One of the questions that I asked was that, were we identifying essential locations and essential services that had the ability to generate power or were in place already? The specific question, and you guys can go back and watch the committee meeting again, I asked, what gas stations do we have arrangements with where we can either retrofit or prepare that gas station in the case of a storm to do a couple of things? Stop price gouging, where they've already made an agreement with the federal government, the state, and the city that the prices would be fair market value and the same. And then secondly, would have a reliable energy source so that they could provide gas in case of an emergency. So I'm expecting that answer by the next, hopefully by the next preparation meeting. And then the other thing about, if a homeowner is solar, I think it's the responsibility of the municipality and maybe the power, how do they harness that energy? Or is there an entity within the community that can harness? Because if you're doing solar, if some people have their solar system set up already, where they have generators and they can regenerate that power based on where they already are. But a lot of homeowners don't know how to do that. So I think Mr. Denise is right in the fact, where is the education component to start now so that we can develop those principles and develop, so to tell people, if you're on solar, if you're on wind, you know, if you're on coughing a lot around your house, here's how we harness that energy and here's how you can use it in case of an emergency. I think that's a great idea. We ought to start doing that right now. Now in New Orleans East, there are 3 sites. I forgot the third one. One is Joe Brown. The other is the Sanchez Center in the lower 9th Ward. What I have asked is also, have we identified police station or substation where there's a generator where people know if the power goes out, if this station is not underwater, then people can contact that particular police district to know that in case of emergency or what's happening with vandalism or the like, they'll have service. The most important thing I think that I got from here, and I apologize for not asking that question, is where's the map? Why don't we already have a map of where those essential services and those from cooling stations to the buses, that'll be, you know, what are their stops? What are their routes? Where can people go? I apologize for that. I was thinking about a whole bunch of other things. I think that should probably be done yesterday. And we'll work with Mr. Austin and the rest of the committee to make sure that's done, because in case of a disaster, if some areas are wiped out, then people know that on the map, these areas are still in place and this is where you can go. We should have been done that. We should have learned that post Katrina. But the other thing that I think we need to be concerned about is a couple of things, is communication, all right? From Katrina to Ida, one of the most troublesome aspects did our communication system hold up? How could you access loved ones? And how could people begin to communicate with folk within the area of impact? That piece has not been fixed yet. You know, you would have hoped Smart City or maybe some other things would have done that. But I can tell you from being in Katrina and then being around for other storms, man, as soon as the wind started blowing hard, our communication system went down. We should have the technology to be able to protect against that. And with the power generation plant where Energy was supposed to pay for it, the city council just worked out a way to pay for it. That's not online until 2023. So we're not gonna have that. And then the last thing is a real education for the community about power, cooling, because one of the most, how would I say, confusing things was after Ida, when you heard council people on radio shows and talk shows saying that the new energy power station that we spent all that money for was the reason that some of the lights in the east came back on. And that didn't work until we found out the Jeff Adelson article days later that didn't work. The reason why the east came on was because some of those substations, their lines are underground, and they connect to a few subdivisions that go down that Morrison, Carmel, Bullard, Lake Willow, Spring Lake core. Had those substations been damaged, then the power wouldn't have been on in that sliver out in New Orleans East. It had nothing to do with that $300 or $400 million Entergy power station. That thing didn't come on until about a week later.
Thank you.
So, you know, dealing with the correct information. But Mr. Neese is absolutely correct in that identifying those essential spots, so whether it's wind, whether it's generators, so people will know, because that helps beyond the recovery. That helps with price gouging. It helps with all of that other stuff.
Absolutely. And thank you for telling the truth about that gas plant while others have said it worked exactly how it was supposed to work. No, we don't see that, and that is not factual. So maybe at some point it will, but at this one it didn't. Now too, we just want to go back to Denise's question and address that to Austin. But Councilman Thomas, thank you for also stating that about the map. People are going through trauma during hurricanes. They're stressed out. They don't need to be wondering, am I going to be all right? And then secondly, too, we're going to address this issue about the transportation in just a minute, but also too, how do we promote solar powered generators, not just solar on homes? That's another thing. Let's get solar powered generators that the city invests in that we can distribute to people. And then what we're talking about too is a training for people how to properly operate gas powered generators. And the other thing too is a PSA. Let's get some public service announcements out there that can go through all of this instead of just hurricane season is here, get your hurricane plan, your hurricane kit, all established. It needs to be deeper than that. We're at a whole nother level now than what we were before. Let's talk about, here are your shelters, here are your cooling centers, here are your bus routes. This is all you need to know on this PSA. Here's how you get trained on generators. Here's how you get solar powered generators. Let's go back to Austin. You got Miss Denise's question down? It's been a minute, so maybe.
It might need to be repeated. I'm sorry. I was listening to Councilmember Thomas.
So I think in short, if I could sum it up for you, Ms. Denise, and if you want to just correct me if I'm wrong, what she's asking is how come we're not investing more and advocating more for solar powered generators and really figuring out how we can distribute them to people so that they're not relying upon gas powered generators, which lead to a whole nother set of dilemmas and problems. How do we get people solar powered generators, and how do we get them trained on the use of gas powered generators, which even if trained, there's problems that arise that lead to death, as we saw in Hurricane Ida.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked about renewable power. The first thing, real quick, I do want to say that we've got a team from the Regional Planning Commission and the city working on mapping essential services and working on standard procedures that we can replicate every year to update our database. It's harder than it might sound, because you've got to pull information from the Department of Health, from occupational licenses, from Department of Environmental Quality filings. So you got to pull information from different places, but we are working on that, and we recognize the importance of having an up-to-date list of where are our gas stations, where are our grocery stores, where's the pharmacies, right? We need all that information when we need it. Now about solar, we have been making progress there. The reality, y'all, is that wind power generation is not really cost effective here in the city. Walk outside right now, well, I don't know about right now, but you know, on a hot summer day when the wind's not moving, that's our climate. Sometimes the wind doesn't blow here. Now, I think like offshore wind in the Gulf probably has a serious future, but here in the city, solar power is probably the best bet for us from a technical feasibility point of view.
Sure.
Right? Now, you need a battery on your house in order for your solar to actually power your house when the grid goes down. Batteries so far are cost prohibitive for a lot of people. I mean, you're looking at $60,000 for the average house, I think, to install solar and a Tesla battery. That's not within reach for most. So outside of, grants or different rebates and things, that's going to be a slow rollout. And we are working on, low interest loan programs and how to set that kind of thing up. I don't know if you caught the announcement, but we were awarded technical assistance from the Department of Energy. For the next year and a half, we're going to be working directly with staff at the National Renewable Energy Labs. They're going to be providing us with basically free technical expertise on how we can scale up solar deployment in the city. So we know, I'm a water scientist. I'm not an electricity guy. So I know how these things work, but we're going to bring in the experts and help us really figure out what's possible and what are our next steps to get it done. We also I think, are going to be able to announce really soon some funding from FEMA to do some grid resilience work in the lower Ninth Ward. That hasn't been finalized yet, but I am increasingly confident that that's going to come through. So we are working on that front, but the progress is going to be slower than, our readiness for this hurricane season. In terms of the offshore wind network, yeah, we will, but that's an Entergy question, right? That's a grid level question. Here in the city, when the grid goes down, we've got to have, building by building power. You guys know about, I'm sure, Together New Orleans with the community lighthouses, as well as Get Lit, Stay Lit. Both of those organizations, while the city's not driving those processes, we meet very regularly with those guys, and we are in lockstep in terms of our work with our congressmen to get funding for those programs to power restaurants and churches. And we are doing everything that we can to support them. So.
All right. Austin, thank you. Listen, before we're going to come back to each of you, but we only have the councilman for 5 more minutes. So I want to take any questions that any of our participants have for Councilman Thomas before he has to go. Sylvia, do you see any questions?
Yeah, before Sylvia asks her question, I think, one of the things that I asked for and that I think we can ask for as a community is that there should probably be a disaster and recovery commission name that tracks success during storms versus those things that didn't go well, where they would report to the public right after the disaster and then begin to work on those things. We thought we did that during Katrina, but the committee that I formed was disbanded when I went on vacation. And I don't know why it was disbanded, but I would think that that would be a good way again, so that we can be able to look at some of the questions that should have been answered from disaster to disaster that Ms. Denise asked, and that many of the questions that you guys have. So, I'm going to request again to the city that we name a committee. I think it would be helpful if you guys would write asking that we name a committee to rate and evaluate evaluate the incident and what we did right versus what we did wrong. The other thing is, and Austin is right, I think we missed it for this year, but going to next year, the Biden administration had put about $83 billion in one category for sustainability and resiliency and some of those things. How do we begin to maybe write some grants to tap into those funds to make maybe some of that stuff more affordable and to subsidize some of that stuff for businesses and residents and essential centers, that we could have that money in place, because it is expensive. But if we can use federal funds to mitigate those costs, then we could at least have better emergency preparation in place.
Absolutely.
To provide that. So those are a couple of things that I think we can help with. And I'm sorry. Sorry.
That's okay.
We will be putting it on the agenda tomorrow at our pillars meeting to get a letter written to the council as well as to the mayor to develop a disaster recovery commission. Yes, thank you. So good. That is a good ask and a good action that comes out of this. Sylvia, you have
yes,
anybody
sir.
with a question? Yeah.
Yes, sir. I wanted to ask my question. Ms. Brooke as well asked this question. Why can't we use the schools that were built better than before Katrina? They have all these standing strong buildings that we're not allowed in. And we're citizens of New Orleans that's been persevering.
Yeah.
Okay. You asking that to Mr.
So
Austin?
whoever want to answer.
Yeah,
Okay, Mr. Austin.
I got a question for the councilman before he leaves, Pastor.
Okay, thank you. Sylvia, we're gonna pause that one because I want to get to a question for
Okay,
for council.
that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, the school system, when it's convenient, they remind us that they're a state and separate agency. So I think that's a good question that they could ask. Go ahead, Ms. Parker Brown.
Hi, Councilman Thomas. I really appreciate the great work that you're doing. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. My question is that have the city considered to move outside of, into other parishes where we can set up storm centers?
Right.
So that would be my concern.
Wow, that's a great question. It's all part of planning and regional planning. One of our shortcomings here is that we have political relationships, but we don't really have strong regional relationships. One of the things we ran into after Hurricane Katrina, some of y'all may remember the public battle that Mayor Kip Holden and I had about centers that were on the governor's center site, but they wouldn't open them because they didn't want those New Orleans people in there. I think that's an area maybe we need to look at in terms of federal intervention, so that they're not only named storm centers, but that the federal government says if it's declared a disaster, that they have to open them. That didn't happen in the past. But I think we could use Avery's information to deal with that. And I think in terms of Avery, talking about calculating who's affected, I think one of the things we could do, Avery, and I think you're onto something, is how do we break down who's most affected? Well, like we've identified our senior population and opportunity youth, in case of a disaster, who's most affected? We would know that from the demographics, access to driver's licenses, who uses public transportation, who's disabled, who's up. I think that's a way we could use some of the demographics and numbers and populations to prepare. But no, we've had a lot of shelters that are named in the area of impact, but it doesn't mean that we have access to them.
And in response to what you just said, Councilman, too, when we talk about our seniors and what Austin has said and putting together what Avery said, when we talk about our seniors and the fact that our cooling centers are not open for people to stay overnight, can we just get some centers that are open for people 55 years and older to have capacity to stay overnight? There are the other folk are more resilient and may be able to suffer through, even though it's hard. But the most vulnerable are 55 years of age and older. So at least let's get some places for them so that they're not overcome by heat exhaustion and suffering heat stroke in the evening.
I think that's the kind of critical information Mr. Neese was talking about that we should have learned from. We know that about a third of our population didn't have access to transportation after Katrina. We know that in terms of opportunity at-risk youth, we have those demographics. We know who our most vulnerable elderly population. We know based on Unity One and homeless shelters who our homeless population is. I think accumulation of that kind of stuff that she's talking about and Avery's talking about would give us a better idea of who to serve. And that's where I think a disaster recovery commission would be helpful. Because had we done that work that Mr. Neese was talking about, we would have known not only what the area of impact was, but the population and demographic of impact. And we have not done that. And it's shameful that we haven't, because I think that is critical, especially given the fact that we're in the zone of weather patterns and disasters.
Right. Frankly, Councilmember, I'm both flabbergasted and disgusted that I know Austin and his crew and whoever else have been working hard, but we're 12 months out almost from a catastrophic hurricane that shouldn't have been as catastrophic as it was. And but for the planning that should have been done post Katrina, we wouldn't be in the same place. And now it just seems like we're heading into another hurricane season. And we are just woefully unprepared again. We'll be sitting here again next year saying coulda, woulda, shoulda, the same way. And that's just my frustration. But I want Avery and Ms. Denise first to say anything that you need to say to Councilmember Thomas before he goes, and then Avery, and then we'll go back to Austin.
Thank you, Councilman Thomas. Thank you for being here with us, because it's a lot of your colleagues that won't even respond to what we're asking them to do, so thank you very much for being here with us.
Well, I've learned a lot. I mean, I'm smart enough to know I don't know everything. I've studied a little bit of this stuff. I'll try to help with my colleagues, but I've learned something here today. The map is essential. How do we break down our demographics from Avery? It's a lot deeper than who just uses shelters. What is that population that could be most harmed? I mean, the state just started working on bridges right in the middle of hurricane season. That doesn't make any sense.
Right. Absolutely.
We've got critical evacuation routes that are closed now. That who does that in the middle of storm season? It's insane to me. And I didn't learn this myself. When I went to the Netherlands and Africa, and I went to China and other places, they are, we may think we want about some of those other countries, but they're very sophisticated. And when you talk about dealing with nature, and so when I formed that committee early on, before I went on vacation, I thought it would gather the type of critical information that you guys are asking now. And I think with y'all help, maybe we can form that kind of commission again, so that we could have that handbook from one disaster, one recovery to the next.
Thank you, Councilman. Hey, let me
Alright.
go give Avery
Thank you.
say one thing to you, and then you go on.
Okay.
Avery,
Yeah,
Yes,
Avery,
sir.
then?
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Thomas. Yes, sir, Reverend, for coming out and assist and helping us get a better understanding of some of the challenges that we face and how we as a community may be able to, what should and will be able to come together to build a collective unit. One thing I wanted to mention is that I recently, several years back, worked with the military in creating readiness centers.
Mhm.
They're automated, low voltage. I can see something like that working with solar. I just wanted to bring that up. And I recall you mentioning such places are, I believe, around Europe with, I think, Finland, Dutch, where they have levee systems, solar. Also, just wanted to make mention, something that I think we've missed out on was talking about the sirens and for the tornadoes, just being prepared for that. I just want to just throw a few of those things out there. But yeah, I believe that we have a lot of resilient people here with knowledge that can help along with the committees that you are looking to form, not just the experts, as you say, and hopefully we can bring this all together, being that we're all in the midst of the storm.
Thank you guys. Appreciate y'all. Thank y'all.
Councilmember, we appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you. Blessings.
We'll
Bye,
talk
Phil.
soon. God bless. All right.
Denise, bye, baby. Bless y'all.
Thank you, Oliver.
Let's turn to this question about transportation. It's come up several times. We're going to go to questions from the general participants in just a moment. But Ms. Austin, while you're here, the question about transportation, what Justice Avion is advocating for is that there be some sort of information that is given out that lets people know exactly where, again, we go back to where are those cooling centers and what are the bus routes, because all bets are off during hurricanes. The routes are not as they generally are every day. Of course, they cannot be. We're talking about the people who are remaining in the city that have to get to a cooling center. Are those routes already established? Can they be publicized so that people know where those routes are, where the transportation hubs are, and how they're going to get to those cooling centers? Let's keep in mind that all of us know that we are still in the midst of a global pandemic. We are seeing rises in numbers. Therefore, the cooling centers that the city set up for RTAA or buses to be cooling centers, no good. It doesn't work. It's not healthy. It's not feasible. And so those need to be out the window, and we need to have routes that are available for people to get directly to these cooling centers. How is the city working with RTA to make sure that we can put out a map of routes for people to get to the cooling centers that are set up?
Yeah, so, the first thing that we're doing about that is, like I said, trying to make it so that there's a cooling center within a mile of everybody. And I know, a mile's still a long way to walk in the heat, but those are, of course, are just our centers. So as more of the community lighthouses go up and online, that'll be, even more density. So
Also, let's talk for a minute, just stop, because I appreciate that answer very much so. But as a member of the
I know it's a long way off.
A long way off. We're barely even going to get our 5 pilots up by this year. So that 85 is a long way off. Are we not any closer for this hurricane season?
All right. So even if we're not counting the community lighthouses or any other facility outside of our 12 to 15 city facilities that will have generator ready, there have been some big changes in the way that the city is planning with RTA around city assisted evacuation. And the main gist of that change is that no longer will we rely on those designated evacu spots. So in the situation that there is a major storm and we are doing a post-storm sheltering, whether that is for cooling centers, or in that scenario, we'd most likely be offering city assisted evacuation for anybody who wanted to take us up on that. In that situation, the RTA buses will work their regular routes. They will provide transfers to folks. So as you get into downtown, you can, if the bus that you're on isn't going downtown, then you can transfer to be taken to wherever the hub is for either the shelter, at convention center, or the evacu site, which is most likely at Smoothie King Center. So in the event that we need that to happen, long story short, RTA will be working their regular routes, and you can get on at your nearest bus stop to be taken to the nearest cooling center.
All right, we're gonna move into questions right now, and I want to start with that question. First, I want to make sure that Avery and Ms. Denise will have any response to that or any concerns about what was just said by Mr. Austin. Denise, Ms. Denise.
I'm gonna let Avery go with, see what let Avery answer.
All right,
Ask him.
okay.
Yes, my question with the transportation, as far as you stated, once the storm hits, it seems as though, for the most part, we are looking for answers after the storm has already hit. I guess what I have is not so much of a question, but a statement. It doesn't seem as though we have any type of procedures already in place, or just something that we will use no matter what the circumstances are. We have, as it was stated earlier, we have a lot of vacant schools. It doesn't seem as though they are being used, that possibly can put solar panels on them. In order to get people to those places, we tend to understand that every time that there's a storm, we have different circumstances, and there tends to be, let's be honest with the situation, a bit of chaos with getting out of the city and getting to places and getting basically information passed around. My question would be, has the city come up with ways that we can, since we only tend to work best after the storm, to get information out to others? We don't seem to have any kind of intercom system. We don't have the sirens. That would be my question right now, is how can the city put in place to help information spread in case the storm takes place and we don't have any shelters to go to?
Mr. Austin.
I'm not entirely sure, Avery, that I understand the question. We have, in terms of our coordination around our evacuation systems and our pre and post-storm communication systems through NOLA Ready, folks come here all the time to learn how we do things. They hold us up as a national model. Not saying we do great, not saying that folks don't suffer. They call it an emergency for a reason, right? It's always a little bit of chaos, but I'm gonna have to push back and say, actually, we're super organized and we do a really good job.
So I don't know, Avery, do you want to respond to that? Because I just have another question regarding transportation before I move to the audience.
Yeah, I was just saying that there isn't a sense of preparedness, saying that it doesn't seem as though the information flows as we would expect it to with so many people within the city. And also, as you stated with transportation, I'm not exactly sure how a situation such as the storm coming through, what will we do after it? If you can expound on that and assist us with that information.
Hey, Avery, what I would add to that too is, one of the things I think that was, I know was an issue last year, when we're talking about these groups of people that can evacuate and these groups of people that are in town, some of our RTA bus drivers, the only ones that can operate these buses, do leave town. They are not secured as first responders for whatever reason. They have to go, they're too concerned with taking care of their families. The city has may or may not have made sure that they receive hazard pay. And so, a quarter or a 50% of your bus drivers leave. Have we taken account that possibility? And I think too, to stress what Avery, if I may, what Avery is referring to, is how do we begin to get those public service announcements that may give people all of the information that they need in preparation for hurricane season, that have to do with generators, that have to do with training places, that have to do with where those cooling centers are and how they get there in the event that RTA drivers are limited, thus limiting the number of routes?
Those are great questions. I mean, I have to take most of that back to our communications folks because you're asking your questions to the wrong guy. So I can, you know, schedule a time when our communications team can come and present and answer those questions about how information gets out there. You know, we use social media, Twitter. It's a little disingenuous to say that like folks didn't have a means to know about where the cooling centers were during Ida because the radio was listing them every half hour. It was on, you know, all of the, I understand, you know, of course, there are times when
The
electronics
power
don't
was
work,
out. The
but
power was out for 10 days. So how could they get that information if the power was out for 10 days?
that's, yeah,
You
that's a great
know,
question.
you got to think about that. You know, everybody doesn't have a car that they're going to go and sit out in and listen to the radio. That's what I did. But everybody doesn't have that option to do that. So what he was asking was about the, you know, an emergency system like a siren or some kind of system that can make that announcement in the event that we don't have power to be able to hear it on TV or on the radio or what have you. You know, kind of, you know, when you're thinking about this stuff, think about the worst case scenario. I mean, like that's how I plan for things around my house. I plan for the worst case scenario. That way that if it doesn't get that bad, I'm good, you know, but at least I planned for that. And so you got to plan for people that's not gonna hear the message. People who, you know,
Right.
it's a lot of people who are gonna miss that message and not hear it because they don't have the means. And like Oliver said, the power, not just the power goes out, but our phones go out.
Yeah.
So we can't communicate. So that information is not being disseminated. So if we know ahead of time, so like, you know, we're being told every year to plan for hurricane season. We're planning for hurricane season, but if we had the information that we needed ahead of time, then that could be a part of our plan as well, instead of, you know, just trying to figure it out. Because with Ida, we should have evacuated, but there was no evacuation notice given, and then there's no contraflow, so it would have been a tangled up mess on the highway. So we need to know these things ahead of time. That's all. That's
Yeah.
all he was really basically saying.
Thank you, Sister Denise. And you know, also we know you're in the hot seat here, and you know, people are just, you know, trying to get some answers, and we'd love to talk to that communications person. Do you have a name of that person that you'd recommend?
Yeah, we actually just hired a new communications director, and that'd be Anna Nguyen. I can put you in touch after we get off.
Thank you so much. And you know, radical climate change requires some radical, new, innovative ways. It may seem old school, but I'm all for giving some people some jobs during a hurricane where they get in a car and they got that amplification system, much like if they're in a parade and they go neighborhood to neighborhood, blasting a public service announcement over the loudspeaker so that anybody can hear it who does not have power, does not have their phone on, does not have a radio, so they're constantly getting updated information. We need to do something radical to save lives. Let me go to questions now because we got about 15 minutes. Sylvia?
Yes, because we have 3 impatient people. Ms. Brooke is first. She had her hand up for a long time.
Okay. Not to come down on you, Austin, but I just want you to know that Twitter and, you know, social media is the last thing that this population who's really in need in our city has available to them, and especially during a storm. It's great for the 20-somethings and it's great, but it is not really the way people communicate who are older, who are the most vulnerable people here and the poorest. The other thing I want to say is that in New Orleans, we have such a much larger population of impoverished people that it's really hard to compare us to socialist countries that take care of their poor and places like that. We may be an example in some ways, but we have a lot to deal with that they do not deal with because they don't have, unless it's the poor fisher people in the Delta in Vietnam. The other thing I wanted to say is, does the population know that those evacuee sites are not operable? We have all been trained to go to those aluminum people standing there. And this is the first I've ever heard that we're not using that system anymore.
Well, so you can still go to the evacuee sites and get picked up. Those are still, first of all, they're all located at bus stops. So you can still go there and get picked up. It's just not the only place you can get picked up.
Okay. Now, the other thing that I think really we're not tapping into, and that is, it is in everybody's best interest. Every citizen in this city wants to improve this situation. They want to make sure that we are safe. So why are you guys not utilizing the public? I mean, you could get bands of people going around in neighborhoods collecting names of the most vulnerable who we have to check on and make sure they're okay and make sure they're out or they're fed or whatever. I mean, people here are wonderful, and I don't think there's any reason.
Brooke, I need you to.
Okay, well, I'm just asking, why
Okay.
have we not utilized the public?
Thank you.
I think we can utilize the public, Brooke. So first thing I'll say is that the council member was talking about how we ought to have a community advisory committee for disaster recovery. I want to repeat that we do have a community advisory committee for disaster recovery. I am the chair. It is a new committee, and we formed it about a year ago. Well, last summer, right before Ida, we had our first meeting, and then we were kind of delayed for a few months after that. But we exist, and hopefully, y'all reach out if you want to get involved in that process. So let's demystify that piece. And then, in terms of utilizing.
Austin, real quick, you called it a what? You said an advisory?
Yeah, we're calling it a
Community
community advisory committee.
Community advisory committee, and to be clear, that what the council member said was disaster recovery commission. So I'm not sure if it's just semantics in the title or if the functionality is different in itself. But
Possible.
we can get to the bottom of that. But just to be clear, go ahead.
Yeah. So possible distinction there. The thing about planning ahead of the disaster to utilize people and anybody, and that includes bus drivers or folks who are going to go door to door to check on homebound residents, is that ideally a lot of everybody is able to get out in the face of a big storm. We know that there's going to be folks who can't, and there's going to be folks that don't leave in advance of a storm. But it's hard to say I have a workforce of 20 folks who go around and check on everybody who's homebound, but half of them leave, right? So it's just a difficult and tricky thing to organize in advance, unless you're unless you're like me and you're a city worker who doesn't leave and you commit to staying here no matter what and doing your job. But, how many people are we requiring to stay, right? Who's essential? That's something that we're always trying to figure out. Who's essential and who am I going to tell can't leave?
But before people left, they could at least report to you, this is what I've checked on.
No, that's true.
I understand that
Yeah.
part's difficult, but I still think we could really.
Well, so we also have, I'm sorry, Eddie, not to interrupt you, but so we also have what we used to have called the Medical Special Needs Registry, where folks who, when they work with their doctors or different service providers, would be told of this, and then you sign up. It's voluntary, and you say, hey, I want to sign up. I live here, and I'm in a wheelchair, and I live alone, right? And so then that would let the city know that you might have special needs, that we should remember you in case of a disaster. They're doing away with that, and they're about to roll out something called Smart 911, and essentially works the same as it's a way for you to sign up to get automatic texts about emergency information, and it's also a way through the sign up process where folks can indicate yeah, I'm a senior who lives alone, or I have medical special needs, or what have you. And so that's a way that folks can elect to get on this registry so that we know that they're out there. Because if there's not a centralized database where folks can voluntarily sign up, then how's anybody going to know where they're at, right?
That's good. That's very good. Will that information be disseminated to people via NOLA Ready to let them know that they need, as in terms of 2 days from now, that the information gets out, that people need to start signing up for that?
Yeah, exactly.
In preparation? Okay.
Yeah,
When do you?
and there will be, I'm sure, a massive blast of information about, encouraging people to sign up for that. It's forthcoming probably in the next, before hurricane season.
All right, thank you.
Pastor
Sylvia,
Mayor.
what's the next question?
Yes, I have 3 people. That's Sister Valerie, Mr. Dennis, and Sister Belinda. Sister Valerie. first.
I do want to say, y'all, I really can take one more question, and then
Okay.
I've got to go.
Gotcha. And let's
Okay.
take Valerie because Belinda, Sister Belinda.
Okay.
already- Valerie.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So glad for you could come and join us again. Also, we really appreciate it. I want to say that when can you come? Great questions been asked and good answers, and you can go back to your people. But I'm like this: accountability is very important to us. And when can you come back and give us a result of you going back to your people and give us an answer to our question that we asked you and you was unable to give us an answer, and without just beyond requesting a meeting with you, or without just beyond calling you or bothering you, when can you come back and give us a follow-up on our questions? And just for to know though, the operators are not a first responders employees. I just want to put that in your pen. But when can you come back and give us an answer on what we asked you? Because it been some very important questions to ask.
Well, thanks for holding me accountable, Valerie. Let me get back with you. Let me go talk with Anna and the NOLA Ready team and see when one of them is available. They do a ton of outreach and they've got a bigger staff than I do. So I'm sure that they can make time for you in the near future.
All right, thank you, Austin.
Pastor,
Yes.
a
yes.
question was asked. Can Mr. Austin take the questions out the chat to ask the other people on the team? Okay.
Yeah, can y'all maybe compile out all the questions after this? Just like Bethany sent me a list before tonight, and then I'll just take them all back to everybody.
Will do. Thank you. So Austin, thank you so much. Anything you want to say in closing before you go?
No, thank you guys for the invitation. Thank you for being patient with me. I don't have all the answers pre-canned, but we are working on it. There's a lot of things in play. Some of it's long-term work and some of it's like immediate this year work. And I appreciate y'all. That's it.
All right. We appreciate you, Austin. Thank you for all your work. We appreciate it. Avery, anything you want to say to the participants before we begin to wrap it up?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for coming out and giving us the opportunity from A Community Voice to let our voice be heard amongst the community and the group as a whole, in hopes that we can work together to come up with solutions, seeing that we are constantly bombarded every year with a storm, even if it just grazes us. Hopefully in the future, we will have answers that we need before the storm comes, so that even if we have a peaceful season, we'll be that much prepared for the years to come.
All right. Thank you, Avery. Denise.
Thank you, Reverend.
Miss Denise.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was typing that. I just wanted to say that this was actually, it was learning experience, and that, again, we should be further along with how to deal with storms. So I hope that whenever we meet again, that we could have some better answers. Because again, hurricane season is next Wednesday. And so, you know, we're getting our plans together, so we need to have information to add to our plans. And so I just wanted to tell everybody that we had great questions. And thank you for having me.
All right, always, Ms. Denise. Thank you so much for being here. All right, everybody, we got to wrap it up here, and we thank all
Pastor
of our
Manning,
parents
before
and
we
guests.
wrap it up, I have one comment I need to make. I learned something from this meeting tonight. Real quick, it's so important that we gotta come to our meetings with our acts and our demand, because I'm very disappointed in some of the answers that we were getting tonight in regards to preparation. It feels as though they just come to the meeting because they've been invited, but they really don't have answers for us in regards to our concerns. So I think we got to be a little bit more aggressive in stating what it is that we want to see happen. And to sit here in a meeting like this and post Katrina, they still can't answer some of our questions. That's really, really sad. You know?
And Sister Belinda, thank you for that. But we did have some very clear asks, and Austin did say that he's going to go back and take those back to get those resolved. And so to just summarize, we did ask that there would be a map that would be developed.
I think it was bull crap.
Well, it might have been.
Yeah, I think it was bull crap. Everybody's set up to die. You ain't getting no daggone answers.
I didn't say that we got answers. I said that we did have specific.
I'm saying you got bull crap, man.
And I won't disagree with you. I'm not on the side of Austin. I'm not.
It ain't about taking sides. It's about lives, brother.
Mr. Dennis, please, sir.
No, I'm saying it because I mean it. You need to quit playing with it.
You can mean it. You can mean it, and I respect that, and I don't disagree with you. What we did get was unsatisfactory. I completely 100% agree with you. But we did have some direct asks, and Justice Damian will continue to demand the answers, which is why we said we need you to come back and give us those answers.
You ain't coming back.
Thank you, Pastor. Dennis, we're not going to argue with Pastor Manning. It's not him that we're concerned about. We're concerned about the leaders in our community and the young man that was not basically prepared to give us some answer to some of our acts. So Pastor, I think this was a great meeting. I learned a lot, and I just feel like, you know, we're desperate and frustrated with what we've been getting in the past. So Justice Beyond is on the right track to get.
And as I said to Austin, it is disgusting and woefully traumatizing, frankly, to see that we're still searching. It's not like this is our first rodeo. It's like we're just scrambling every single time. And it feels like we're going to be at the exact same point, and people are dying. So we must continue to stay on them, demand that this be put in place, and to call them out when it's not. We cannot allow our people to continue to suffer like this. It is.
Pastor Manning.
So let's, Sylvia, yes.
I just wanted to also say, I had put Ace in the chat earlier, but in these type of situations, we rely on each other too. So as I put in the chat, we need to be riding bikes. I have a lot of bikes my brother confiscated. If you need one to ride, I got you. So we need to put out numbers. If you need gas, I got some, I got you.
Yeah.
So that's all I wanted to say, Pastor. Thank you.
And you're right, Sylvia. Thank you for reminding us of that.
Yes.
We need to figure out a way to support our own people.
Yes.
If we need to put out if we need to outfit a vehicle with a bullhorn on it and start going through the neighborhood and put some big old speakers on it and a microphone and start making some public service announcements, Justice Damian got just a little bit of money. We're gonna get somebody to do it, or we can.
I got some too. Let's do it.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Yeah. We gotta alert our own people and quit relying upon the government to do what they just simply are not going to do. So let's take any announcements before we close. Any announcements anybody has?
I'm going to make a double announcement here. This is Ann Meyer. Among other things, I am a member of the Lower Ninth Ward Voters Coalition, which has vehicles and bullhorns because we go through neighborhoods engaging voters, telling them when it's time to vote, getting them out of their houses and moving. There is a group that would be delighted to work with Justice and Beyond to do exactly what we're talking about in sharing the public information as needed. I think that's not a bad idea. I also have just finished sending Austin and copying some of the rest of you and Councilman Thomas, the questions that were in the chat that had not been answered, to give them a chance to answer it correctly. I think it's terribly unfair that they have just hired a new communications person today for this responsibility. And Austin has never been through a hurricane in New Orleans. The city is not thinking clearly about this. And by the way, if any of you have any interest, the Lower Ninth Ward Nina and Voters Coalition are offering a book discussion and meeting group facilitated by Calvin Johnson. The topic is who gets to vote. We are planning on having the community get together and discuss this, because the more we get together and build community, the better our communication is, the more we know our neighbors. That's it.
Thank you, Ann.
My name and phone number in the chat in case anybody wants to give me a physical phone call to get information about the who gets to vote. I know Brooke and many of the rest of you have the information for registration, but I'll put it in here too.
Thank you. And any other announcements?
Yes,
Pastor.
Pastor,
Go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Val.
Go ahead, Valerie.
Sylvia, can you make that announcement?
Okay, yes. I just wanted to say, everyone, Justice and Beyond, we can always still use your help. I still have several t-shirts, small, medium, large, extra large that's left. We taking just $15 for them now. Please be supportive of us, because we always be supportive of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. And listen, we want to raise up more pillars. We need y'all help with Justice and Beyond. If you want to be a pillar organization, come on board with us and be present in our pillars meetings on Tuesday. We'd love to build capacity alongside you and with you. Any other announcements?
Okay, Pastor, I'm ready. RTA will have a meeting in the morning for 10 o'clock, and it will be on Zoom. You can go to norta.com. It's not .org. It's norta.com, and you can join the meeting. It will be online, Zoom.
All right. Thank you, Valerie. Any other announcements? All
Many
right.
of you probably know that there's a big meeting in Baton Rouge on June 4th. It's a Gulf Gathering for Justice and Joy to challenge our lawmakers in Baton Rouge about taking climate problems seriously and preparing for it, not just because of storms, but because we need to move towards renewable energy. It's open to the public. They're going to meet at the Capitol. If you're interested, you go to Climate, Justice, and Joy. All small letters, climatejusticeandjoy.com.
Thank you, Ben. All right. Any other announcements before we close?
Pastor Manning, Ms. Parker Brown, I just want us to follow up on our conversation that we had a few days ago. So as soon as you get a chance, call me back. Thank you.
Sure will. Thank you, Sister Belinda. Any other announcements before we close? All right, everybody. Y'all be safe. COVID numbers are on the rise. Protect one another. Wear a mask if you're able. Let's close in prayer. Sister Belinda, would you close us in prayer, please?
Yes, Pastor. Heavenly Father, most gracious God Almighty, Lord, we just thank and praise your holy name. Lord, we just thank you for each and every individual that attend this very important meeting on tonight. Lord, we ask that you would just lead us and guide us and direct us, Father, on those things that we know that we need. But you are the supplier of every need. You promise, Father, that you will supply every need according to your riches in glory by Christ Jesus. So, Father, we just thank and praise you for the safety of each and every individuals, that we would stay safe and protect our families. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Thank God.
Amen. Thank you, Sister
Amen.
Glenda. God bless everybody. Y'all be
God
safe.
bless
Thanks for coming
everybody.
tonight.
Take care.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, you all.
Good